This video is about the effect of multiple filters on airflow. These filters are pretty much everything filters for hobbies. In addition to small particles, they filter out a number of different chemicals and organic vapors. I had done a test earlier with 4 filters like this and covering them up, and what I found was that I pretty much nearly no detectable difference between the number of filters that I used, whereas with these filters there was a very noticeable difference. So with one filter at 2 watts, it took 80 seconds to fill up a 50-liter bag, and with 4 filters at 2 watts, it took about 32 seconds. At 3 watts, it took a minute with 1 filter and less than half a minute with 4 filters. It's not quite a linear relationship, which is a direct proportion where twice as many filters, half as much time, but still a very noticeable difference. Also with the filter, the Roomba filter that I pointed out a moment ago near the start of this video, with this filter I noticed that tested that whether I pulled air from the filter or blew air towards the filter, I got the same amount of air moving through, or roughly the same amount of air moving through the filter. With the setup of that one filter, I didn't test it with all 4 yet, but with one filter, it was more effective to pull air from the filter than blow air into the filter. Now, one thing with this setup that you might wonder about is perhaps because I started with one hole with one filter and then added holes for the other filters, and I'm using a mixture of putty like this and duct tape to hold them together. So maybe I introduced some air leaks, and what I was actually measuring as less time was just air leakage and not a difference from adding more filters. And it's good to think about, science is really about proving ideas wrong. So like if I want to test this setup and make sure that it's not just the setup, what could I do? And it could have been one thing that I could do is just cover up 3 of the filters. And if it's the increased time is because of leaks, let me use a generous amount of tape. Now it's better if someone else does the confirmation research, because I kind of have a bias to prove my own idea. So to a certain extent, I may subconsciously want to find out that I am correct, and that in this case more filters, which fits my intuition, would allow more air to flow through, and that the increase in airflow is not from air gaps. And also just out of subconscious pride, I might kind of be like, not want to think that I actually caused some leaking when I put this together. So ideally it's better if someone else actually tests out the research, because the core of science is about making things not work or proving ideas wrong, so that the ideas that survive that test can be relied on. So as much as science helps with engineering, which is the art of making things work, science itself, the heart of it is doing the opposite, finding out what doesn't work so that we can have more confidence in the ideas that have not yet been proven not to work. I got that definition from Terry Pratchett. Okay, so now I covered up 3 of the fans. Or sorry, sometimes I say, you probably noticed that if you've watched these videos, I'll say a word that's not the exact word I meant to use. So when I said fan, I actually meant covered up 3 of the filters. And I'm setting it up for this test, I'm trying to use wattage, which changes a little bit based on the amount of resistance. Making a note, cover up 3 filters. And this video will kind of show how I covered them up. And we're looking at power is 3.0 watts. I'm going to test the airflow. And the voltage right now is 10.81. And initially I got 3 watts at 11.01. So there might actually be some leakage because I would be expecting to have the same voltage for the same power. So it's quite possible that some of the result was from leakage around the filter housing rather than improvements in performance from adding more filters. So I'll get my 50-liter bag and test the time. Somewhere around here I do have something I can use for a stopwatch. This setup I can actually operate with one hand, so it makes it a lot easier to test the times. And let's see how this goes. Definitely does seem like it's taking more time. It's already taken more time than it was with 4 filters. It's already taken about as much time as it took at 1 watt with 4 filters. Okay, looks like it got 55 seconds. Which is a lot less than 80 seconds. So there might actually be, some leakage. But the leakage isn't all of it because I'm still at least under half the time. So now I'm gonna try setting this down to 1 watt. This took 51 seconds with 4 filters. particular step up, step down power source that I'm using is kind of nice because it lets me see exactly the amount of power it's feeding the device. So it looks like we're at 6.95 volts and 1.0 watts. Actually, I think I'll skip the, I'm going to skip the 1 watt test because I didn't have a 1 watt test on the other one. So I had 80 seconds for 2 watts and then 60 seconds for 3 watts. Oh, actually no, I guess I was much closer to, this could be mostly leakage. Because I got 55 seconds at 3 watts as opposed to 60 seconds at 3 watts. So I'll try the 2 watts. And it could be that most of the difference in the performance of adding extra filters is actually coming from the amount of leakage. So I'm going to do a 2 watt test, and if that comes out to being near 80 seconds, oh no, actually that's, if I get the same results, that actually would indicate things are working. So 55 seconds at 3 watts matched what I got for 1 filter at 3 watts. Press the, this also has a on-off switch, which I just pressed, that's why the fan stopped. So at 2 watts, if it ends up taking 80 seconds, then there's probably very little leakage in the setup. And it's mostly, it would be mostly due to the filters. So at 9.25 volts, I'm getting 2.067 watts instead of 2.0 watts is what I initially got. So the way this fan works is if there's, the less resistance there is, then the more wattage I get per volt. I assume because the fan will move a lot faster at the voltage and just end up using more power. It's actually probably pretty complex and very worth thinking more about. But at this time I'm focusing on just doing these, recording some measurements. But the main thing that I'm saying is that because I'm getting the same wattage at slightly lower voltage, there's probably a little bit of leakage, but it still seems like most of what I noticed was the difference in the performance of the filters. So let's see, we have 9.2 volts. Instead of 9.25. and 2.0 watts, fluctuating between about 1.99 and 2.06. It seems to be close to 2 watts. And see if this is somewhat close to 80 seconds, or if maybe I just had a lot of leakage. Put the timer there so you can see it on the video. I think I actually put this here. Okay, we're at about 40 seconds now. Also, in terms of whether a same person or a different person does the research, I'm noticing right now that I have kind of a bias to get about the same time, because I know that I stopped at 80 seconds before, and I think the bag is full. So I got 72 seconds. Might have even been 60, closer to 60 seconds. So there might be some leakage in the setup. But there's also still a difference from the filters. So if I take this tape off again, so that I have 4 filters exposed, and drop the voltage down so that I get back to 2 watts. That's what I was talking about when I said as the resistance drops, the voltage for a specific wattage also drops. So the wattage is how much power. Effectively, a watt is lifting something like this roll of tape about 10 centimeters or 100 millimeters under our gravity. Or another way of looking at it is lifting a bottle of water, 1 liter soda bottle, up 1 meter is the local gravity in joules, and if you do that in 1 second, it's watts. So lifting a liter of water 1 meter is about 9.8. If in doing that in 1 second is 9.8 watts. So watts, power is how quickly you do work. The work itself, that's measured in joules. But if you can do a joule of work in 1 second, that's a watt. Okay, it looks like I'm getting 2 watts at 9.0 volts. I should be recording this more neatly. So you got over a minute to fill up the bag with 3 of the filters taped. And we're using the same power now with 4 filters. And it looks like it's filling up in about 30 seconds. So about, in this case, about half the time. And very close to what I got before. I got 32 with 4 filters before, and now I'm getting 33. So it seems like my observations were valid. And essentially what I came to realize is that if the filters have more resistance, it matches my intuition that more filters will allow for more airflow. When the filters offer less resistance and other parts of the setup, say a hose like this, or just the narrowing of the exhaust port for the fan and such, offers some resistance, it seems like there can be very little difference between changing the number of filters. So if you're using a filter like this from Roomba, definitely just use one of them. If you're using Honeywell multi-chemical and particle filters, use several.